This is Dr. Chris with Radio Horror, 91.3 FM, WCAW at the Hartford Comic Con, and we're here with artist Jack Purcell, and he's talking to us a little bit about weekly comics, which he has a little bit of a history with working on, along with some of his other works and his project coming out, Malice and Mistletoe. Thank you for sitting down for a little while, Jack.
Sure, happy to do it.
Why don't you talk a little bit about Malice and Mistletoe and give us a brief summary of what that's about?
Malice and Mistletoe should be coming out around Thanksgiving, which is right where the story begins. It revolves around three main characters. Krampus, who a lot of people are sort of coming to know with the new Kevin Smith movie. The trailer's kind of setting the internet on fire right now. And then Claus, who is Santa Claus, and Eldon, who is kind of like a mercenary for hire. So there's a tension between those three characters. There's a lot of playing off the lore of Christmas, and there's not a lot of nice people running around in this story. It's black and white with red and green tones, so not like Sin City in that it's just that one red tone, but it has a different look to it. I'm penciling and inking it, where I'm really known as an inker for DC, Marvel, and Disney and all those guys. So it'll have a really different look to it. It's really fun. There's a lot of bloodshed and bad things going on. So I don't want to say too much about what happens in the story, but I think it's really different. There's a lot of moments in the story where I think it sets it up for the viewer to expect some actions and situations to occur that don't. So there's some nice swerves in the storyline that I think people will enjoy, and they won't feel like this is just another generic comic book that they're going to read and put down and forget.
There's another Krampus movie currently in development. It was just announced, called Krampus versus Santa Claus, or Santa Claus versus Krampus.
Oh, we better move on our book quick.
Yeah. Now, you worked on some weekly books as well, and you were telling me that weekly comics are not easy, and there's a lot of maybe too many cooks in the kitchen trying to get a story done. Can you give us a little bit, without naming names, like example of like what happened with something like Countdown, which I'm not a big fan of, and why something like maybe 52 was more successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think Countdown had so many issues, and it is a matter of too many cooks in the kitchen. And
love that phrase.
it began with a bunch of writers, an editor with, I think at that point, 2 assistant editors, basically 4 teams of us, and the idea was that as soon as one artist was finished with an issue, the reward was you would move on to the next one. So if you worked on deadline or ahead of deadline, you would in turn get more work. And we were doing that at the beginning, and one issue was completely finished, and I was waiting to move on to the next one, and received a phone call that we were so far ahead of schedule that they've decided to redo the issue, which we ended up doing a second time. And then we were no longer ahead of deadline and lost our place in moving forward in future issues. So then on top of that, one of the editors left the project and ended up taking over the Batman books, and that's really why I got into comics, is to work on Batman. So the new editor was keeping some people and bringing in some different creators to switch it up and using some of his guys, so that made it even more complicated. So now the teams that were established are no longer the teams, and this was like maybe a quarter of the way into a 52-issue series. So you've got 4 teams working at the same time producing issues, instead of it being, which is hard enough doing a monthly book. So you had 1 team for a monthly book. There were 4 teams, which then quickly splintered into 6. And then those teams changed, editors changed, assistant editors were different. And I don't even know if I knew who to contact at some points. It was incredibly complicated and almost comedic at some points. But the book came out on time. I mean, it worked out, but it was always by the skin of our teeth. Some stuff was getting rewritten, so there'd be portions of issues that would be changed, and they'd have to have the same art teams go back, stop what they were doing, go back to the issue they had completed, redo a part that had been rewritten, which then later had consequences on other issues, which had to be redone again by the same teams, who with the editorial switch made that a very complex process.
Would you do a weekly book again?
Depends what it is. If it were Batman, I would do it. I got into comic books to do Batman. That was and I made that very clear to all the editors I worked with. As a matter of fact, I left Countdown because I was offered a 9-issue Batman series. So
Which series was that?
Gotham Underground.
Oh, okay.
Which was maybe my favorite project I ever worked on.
What was Underground about?
It was sort of similar to a book called Batman Family from the 70s, where each issue would be focused on sometimes tertiary or secondary characters. Like you might get an issue that featured Robin, Batgirl, and the Scarecrow. The next one might be Batmite, whatever it was that month. But it was fun. It was a fun book, and this really focused on the villains, which I like the villains of Batman. So
that's why they're getting their entire season to themselves on Gotham starting tomorrow.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Are you excited for Gotham returning?
I've never seen it. I don't get into the TV shows. I don't care about Flash, Green Arrow, or Batman on TV.
Gotham's really good.
And plus, I'm so busy with Malice and Mistletoe. The truth is, I don't have time. At some point, maybe I will, but it doesn't really interest me. I'm not a fan of prequels. I don't care. I think it takes the tension out of the storyline. We all know these guys are going to survive. We all know essentially what's going to be the end result. So
unless
to me,
it's a character you've never heard of.
Right. I mean, there's ways to make that interesting. I think generally it's not, but that's just me. So no, I don't care about those shows, but Batman, to be offered the opportunity to do a 9-issue Batman book was much more interesting to me than continuing this crazy, Ferris wheel of a weekly book.
Cool.
But it was fun. I mean, anything DC and Marvel offer me is always something I consider. I haven't turned down. I don't think I've turned down much of anything from DC except when they've offered me something at the same time where I've had to pick and choose, which is nice. I mean, that's the ideal situation. I don't know, weekly books now. I think Batman Eternal, they're doing another one, and I haven't been approached about it, so I don't plan on working on it, but that could change tomorrow.
Well, thank you, Jack, for taking the time out to come on the show and talk about Malice and Mistletoe and your other work and the ups and downs of working on a DC a weekly series.
All right, yeah, thanks, Dr. Chris.